Hallo meine lieben Zuschauer, was geht ab? Heute gibt's wieder ein neues Video von mir auf Deutsch. Having taught German for a little while, one of the biggest things that I know everybody struggles with is this idea of cases. It confuses them and yeah, it sometimes even scares them off from learning the whole language entirely. But what I can tell you today is if I could learn those cases and I went through exactly the same process, it was confusing. It was just, sometimes it just would not make any sense, but I got there in the end, and so can you. So, hence why today I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to know when to use the accusative and dative, what they actually are, and some examples as well. At the end of the day, grammar is something you've got to learn, but it depends on how you learn it. For example, I can tell you the accusative refers to the direct object, and the dative refers to the indirect object. But I'm pretty sure that 90% of people are not going to know what this direct object, indirect object, subject, verb, etc. etc. You get what I mean. So I have included in the description box two sort of printouts that you can keep with you, and this is what I did when I was learning both the cases, or anytime I needed a reminder of when to use which one, and it's actually not that difficult. It just takes a little bit of practice. So erstmal fangen wir mit dem Akkusativ an. So one of the biggest aids when you're first starting to learn German and the cases is knowing this one thing, and that is that the verb haben, so to have, and es gibt are always followed by the accusative. And in the accusative, so you'll know the articles der, die, das. In the accusative, only the der changes, so the masculine form, and that changes to den. So that makes things already pretty simple. So basically the accusative answers the question was, wen, or wohin. So what, who, and where to. So don't confuse the who with to whom or for whom, because that's the dative, and I'll get to that in a second. So it's basically, imagine if there's a construction to be like I, verb, something or someone. So to give you an example, ich trinke einen Tee. It's because tea is masculine, it's not ein Tee, but einen Tee. So ich trinke einen Tee. Ich habe einen Hund. And to make it a little bit simpler, if you want to say I drink the tea or I have the dog, instead of saying I have a dog or I drink a tea, it's ich habe den Hund. Ich trinke den Tee. Or you could say ich sehe dich. I see you. It's not ich sehe du, because all of the pronouns also change depending on if they're in the accusative or the dative. But I will also include a little box or like another printout that you can always keep by and have it handy when you need it. And the next thing that confuses a lot of people are prepositions. So in the accusative there are only 5 that you've got to remember, and when you're starting to learn prepositions, learn the ones that are just for each case, because there are ones that are just accusative prepositions, there are dative prepositions, and then there are a few which take both, but we'll get to that in a second as well. So basically, the memory aid that I always use was dogful, because yeah, it just sounds like a dog and it's funny. And you'll see it on the little sheet that I provided for you. So basically, there's durch, ohne, gegen, für, So basically, ich gehe durch den Park. Ich kann nicht ohne dich leben. And those are a few examples. So when it comes to those prepositions that take both accusative and dative, like in and auf or an for example, remember that the accusative answers the question wohin, where to. So it's associated with the movement. So to give you an example, we'll take walking through a park. You would say, ich laufe durch den Park, or let's take you go into the city. Ich gehe in die Stadt, so it's die Stadt, it's feminine. Ich gehe in die Stadt, it's a movement. So it stays in the accusative, so the feminine doesn't change in the accusative. But if you're saying that you are in the city, you are in a location, the dative refers to a location, so it's a static place. So if you are standing in the city, or if you're just in the city, you would say ich bin in der Stadt. So ich gehe in die Stadt, so a movement, compared to ich bin in der Stadt. So my teacher in high school always said a lot of leg verbs or movement verbs take the accusative. So like joggen, rennen, laufen, springen, etc. So next, moving on to the dative. 3 things on the dative. The dative answers the questions to whom, for whom, or where. So pretty simple. Wo or wem. So wem is the German question for to whom or for whom. Not to be confused with wen. The first thing that I would probably recommend learning are the verbs and the prepositions that always take the dative. So, for example, verbs like geben, ich gebe dir, I give you something, and that something will then be in the accusative. So there's danken, helfen, gefallen, like es gefällt mir, I like it, or it is of liking to me if you're literally translating it. Schenken, ich schenke dir, ich schicke dir, so schicken. And then there are also all of the dative prepositions that are always followed by the dative. So the first ones you probably learn are von, so from, mit, with, so ich bin mit dir, I am with you, ich gehe mit meiner Mutter, not with meine Mutter. And as I said, especially when it comes to those prepositions like in or auf and an, if it's not a movement, if it's not referring to a movement, then it's going to be in the dative. So for example, I think I did this last time, but so hier ist mein Handy. Mein Handy ist auf meinem Kopf. But ich lege mein Handy auf meinen Kopf. So that's the action. I'm putting it on my head. Ich lege mein Handy auf meinen Kopf. And then when it is on my head, you'd say mein Handy liegt auf meinem Kopf. So there you go. So I hope these tips helped you guys knowing when to use and how to use the accusative and dative. So remember, the accusative refers to a movement. Haben and es gibt are always followed by the accusative, and the construction is I, verb, something or someone. Whereas the dative, the construction is I, verb, something to someone or for someone, or it refers to a location. But usually the location aspect of it is followed by a preposition. So learn those prepositions. And once again, I've also included a really handy chart with the dative, accusative prepositions and the ones that take both. So, ich wünsche euch einen wunderschönen Tag und bis bald. Ciao!